But in any case, then it's time to go ahead. And the next point is actually the presentation from yesterday and the presentation from the outcome yesterday. And to do so, I would like to invite our three facilitators from the session from yesterday: Michela Vignoli, Chris Schubert, Elena Simkovic, to come here and to share with us what is the outcome from yesterday. How does it like? Please, you can come all of you first.
Okay, I will quickly report what was discussed yesterday in our track on access and availability of publications and data. We had many very interesting discussions, which sometimes went very on hot topics with really issues which it's not clear yet how to tackle them. I will try now just to summarize the things that were discussed that also could be used for policy recommendations. So for one thing, we heard by Patrick Danowski that already a few countries agreed that, European countries agreed that by 2025, they want to achieve 100% open access for publications. The long-term goal should be to reach a fair gold open access. And the question that was raised is which open access models should be supported. And basically, I think that the outcome of the discussion was that all three models, the green, the gold, and the hybrid, should be supported in this transition phase. Of course, I mean, if there are individual preferences for one of the models, it can be argued as well. But for instance, for the hybrid model, especially Patrick Danowski, he underlined that it's important to have this model or to support this model as well for the transition phase, because it can be really a catalyst for negotiations with the publishers. So basically for libraries or also for research funders who negotiate the costs for open access or also the subscription costs for journals. This model offers apparently a very good chance really to have a good negotiation position. But in the long term, we should aim really to a fair gold model. So where we basically go away from this subscription model and we have only the gold model with the APCs. Good. Yeah, and basically also we all agreed that it should be a rather slow, smooth transition process to be targeted. Yeah. Another point, which is less about the costs for open access, but more about increasing the attractivity for open access for the researchers actually, because also many researchers are still either reluctant or unsure if they really should go for the open access model, because still it's evaluated for the own career progression. It's more evaluated if you publish in a journal with a high impact ranking rather than in any other venue. So this is something which really should be changed, right? So the right incentives should be put on a policy level to make open access more attractive for researchers. And it's important to change the evaluation system for the research work and to apply other metrics, because especially the journal impact factor is really something that shouldn't be used for that. Also what was discussed is the budget shift. So if we now should free some budget for APCs, it should be defined where the money comes from. And also probably for the transition phase, additional funding will be required, because libraries especially will still have the subscription costs. But of course, in the beginning, if you start to have open access publications, you will have you will have to have an additional budget for the APCs. And over time, this will reduce again. Good. And another point, which we discussed also in the end, is open access to research data. So basically, all agreed that in the policies, it should be mentioned that open data or open access to research data should be facilitated. But yeah, it wasn't really clear what, how to say, or let's say like that, it was less clear than for the open access of publications what really should be in the policy recommendations. So in the end, we highlighted 5 points, which could be recommendations for policies. Especially research funders who really can free budget for APCs, they should mandate for open access publications. But only if they really have the budget for that. So if you can budget for open access publications, it's very good to have a mandate. If you don't have a budget with it that you can offer, maybe it's better to just have a recommendation. And also for data, probably currently it's better to just recommend that because it's still, well, there are still many unclear points. For instance, sustainability, how it will be funded after the project and so on. So, but in any case, it should be recommended to really open up the data. As I already said, support all the 3 models, green, gold, and hybrid during the transition phase, but also negotiate with the publishers for better prices and a better distribution of prices, and by 2025, we should aim for having fair gold open access. This is actually a very high goal, but I think most of the discussants agreed that it's better to have a higher goal that we may not reach, not completely reach, but still, if you aim for a higher goal, you probably will also reach more in this time frame. Yeah, as I already said, APC's budget should be freed for. Now this is actually an additional point because this was also raised as an issue. There are independent researchers, or also, which was discussed before, publications after the end of a project where you don't have a budget anymore. It's also recommendable to free some budget for those APCs where people can apply for, right? So they basically ask, okay, I want to publish there and I need money for that. Especially research funder, it would be great if they could have such a budget. This is especially for the long-term sustainability of the APC's model. Good. And finally, also the recommendation is to adapt the performance agreements to really go away from this general impact factor as evaluation metric for researchers, and other metrics like alt metrics, for instance, should be considered. So I think these were the 5 main points that were discussed yesterday. And yeah, not sure if you have questions, not sure if you're supposed to take questions.
Indeed, there are questions. I already see some hands. Thank you, Michela, for your summarizing the outcome from yesterday in session 1. Yeah, so we're going for.
Hi. With respect to data recommendation versus something else stronger, are we in a different stage now with respect to data than we were when the open access mandate was introduced to publications? Is there more uncertainty on data now than we had then for publications? And the reason I ask that is because it feels like recommendation is maybe leaving the door open for not complying too much. And the reasoning that there is no money post-project is probably even more reason for doing it at doing good data practice and generation. So we kind of apply that in marine. So what we do is the infrastructure is there. There's still uncertainties on metadata and many other things. But what we put forward simply is archive it at generation. You can release it when you want, but hopefully before project ends, because we'd like you to publish it. And that works. That works. That captures the data in some exploitable format, imperfect as it may be. And if we run out of resources post-project, that's fine. It's not lost. It's not sitting in an Excel somewhere. And that works better. Recommendation, it fizzles out. It drops off the priority list. And if you don't have resources, even more so.
Eric?
Yes, thank you. We're not going to continue the debate that we did yesterday, of course. But I was just wondering, when you draw your conclusions now, are they to replace certain guidelines, or is it just the clarification of some things that weren't from the beginning? And as an example, I was wondering, if I'm not mistaken, in the guidelines there was a possibility to create a JPI climate repository as a final or as a transitional solution. When you state today that fair gold is to be the ultimate goal, would that still be an option?
That's a good question. I mean, I think that even if fair goal will win in the end, right? Probably there will still be at least some subscription journals, I guess. I mean, it could be that open access completely wipes out the subscription model, of course, but we cannot say that for sure now, I think. So there is still the possibility that some subscription-based journals will survive, and for those having the repositories for still being able to post there the preprint, this is of course still a very valuable option. So I would say for now that we really cannot really see how this whole transition will end. It's certainly wise to have both, basically.
Thank you. I just want to point out something that I already said probably, but I'm sorry about that. There is much more than publications to green. There's all of the additional scientific information that you might consider that will be produced by JPI Climate. So again, you're finding me a little worried now.
yeah. But
Okay.
but this sustains even more the notion to have these repositories, because of course it's thinkable that you put there not only the preprints but also other kinds of data. I don't know. There is a huge possibility for this. So yeah, I completely agree with you.
Bear it in mind, please.
Yeah.
Probably your question related to this discussion, because we have another question. And we'll come back to you.
Hi. I have to admit I haven't read the guidelines, but referring to the data portion, it sounds like the majority of these recommendations would apply to newly created research. And if I want to build on top of somebody else's research, then that's great. But what if you want to do primary research? What are we doing to encourage, say, national weather station networks to open up their data, or national forest inventories to open up their data? Because right now that's a huge hurdle, trying to get these, this empirical data actually from these countries. And I didn't hear anything that kind of would encourage that kind of data openness.
I think in general, convincing stakeholders to free their data, to open it up, it's not always easy. Some institutions or some organizations are very happy to do that, but others are really reluctant to do it. Some because they can sell their data, some because they just don't, I don't know, I've heard, for instance, that, we put so much effort into creating this data, and now we should just simply give it away for free. This is insane. So these are basically the mindset that we are dealing with. And I think this will take a process really to convince those people. Probably if more and more data will be opened, some institutions or some organizations or also some individuals will automatically change their minds in this thing. But really, I think for this it's really necessary to do advocacy work, and probably there is not one answer that fits all. Probably it's really, you have to discuss with the individual organizations really to see what their barriers are to open their data, and yeah, so I'm not sure that I can give something that you could add to the policies. Not really sure what this could be actually.
Okay, so the recommendations and the guidelines apply basically to just newly created research, not any of this empirical data.
I think that this doesn't exclude empirical data.
Yeah. Okay.
I would say that the research data should be really taken as very broadly, really all data that is being created during a research process.
Yeah.
Just for starters, and then of course you will not be able to put everything online, but still. Yeah.
Thank you.
Maybe some words in addition what Michela already said regarding this issue on data. What we tried with the guidelines was indeed to tackle, not go beyond the research output. This is publications, and that's why we included a section on at least announced and explained the problem or the problematic of metadata, for example, or even methods. When you're doing research, you use tools, methods, and what should happen with these methods. So we tried to widen the perspective. I don't know to what extent we managed, but and indeed I think that the recommendations you find at the very beginning of the document are pretty focused on indeed research output, I would say, but we've also listened what Marco said, that of course we're talking about climate-related research with an extremely wide field, but in any case, data plays a crucial role in climate-related research. So we just can't oversee or just ignore that the problem, so to say, the problem of data is more controversial and probably more complex than just putting research outcome like publications at putting available. But related to this availability of research, and maybe just saying some words on Eric's contribution yesterday, which was very valuable. We were talking pretty long time on, we tried to avoid this classical debate between green and gold, but somehow it came. But what I personally learned yesterday is precisely related to this issue on what does actually open access mean. And for me, it was interesting to, or at least for a reflection that I did personally, is on that Eric actually said, what is gold open access and what is green? And maybe gold and green doesn't share the same goal ultimately, because green can be applied for every kind of knowledge, including data, metadata, methods, and maybe gold is more, at least the way, for example, national states and European Commission are organizing or are orientating this story on gold open access is pretty oriented to research outcome. This is publications. I know that there are open data journals, but it is pretty focused on this issue. So maybe green and gold, I'm convinced, and that's why we've written in the guidance, green and gold and even hybrid, as far as you have the control and not publishers, are compatible, but maybe it is even beyond this compatibility debate, but to thinking that maybe green and gold are not necessarily pursuing the same goals. That was something that I was thinking yesterday.
You're mentioning building a JPI repository. Are we referring to building a collection or something more sophisticated than that? because I'm sure all the facilitators know this better than I do. But for the community, the infrastructure exists already. It accepts not just the output as research output as papers. It will accept the full range of objects that research churns out. It will link them. It will give you the alternative metrics of societal attention on them. So the bottleneck is not technical. It's really the willingness of the owners to release it and of the initiative to collect it in a single place. And that, in a way, is aligned with with many of the calls that are now coming up in the next 2 years from the Commission on that issue. So use the infrastructure that exists. It's very simple. And that doesn't mean that there's no, with respect to data, that there are important issues to consider, but when you talk to the people that run the repositories, for them, of all the bottlenecks, you releasing your content is the main one. Not that metadata is not an issue, not that there isn't really important things to consider. Situation is not perfect. But they are starving for content, so give them your content.
Yes, I wanted to comment some the question. Actually, the question from you, from Eric, related to the suggestion that in the guidelines, this is indeed it's a point, and it is written that JPA Climate could think on running an own repository. It was an open point, but now I'm quite convinced that it wouldn't bring some anything special, I would say, because there's enough repositories out there. So, yeah.
It's built for the, well, you know better. It's built for a, what is it built for? What is Zenodo built for? For the open air, it's the machinery behind open air, is that correct?
Yeah, I think you think about Zenodo.
Right.
Yeah. This also a bit depends on the culture, because there are different culture of sharing data, especially, of course, for research communities who already share the data. Some prefer to have repositories for their own research area, thematic repositories. Others really are not fixed on that. They use like non-thematic repositories. So this is also a bit attached to that. I'm not really sure how this works currently with the climate research. But of course, if there are already places where climate researchers put their data on, and this is like a community agreement which developed over time, you should go for those repositories, because
Sure.
there you will find, you put your data where already other climate data is. Yeah.
Okay, we're talking on data, and I think that's the right point to shift to Chris and the second session.